Thank you very much for this opportunity to address the Aditya Birla Group through this program on Voyage. The topic given to me is economic policy and the way ahead. And I will cover the period mostly since 2014 and then explain what I expect to happen in the near future and perhaps later after 2019 where I'm quite confident that we are coming back to power. So one of the few poorly recognized facts, one of the poorly recognized fact is that there are many things that we inherited which we did not speak about in 2014. The classic case is that of the NPAs of the banks, where earlier on there were hardly any fixed rules. It was ad hoc. A telephone call from the Minister of Finance made it possible for somebody to get loans. The classifications were lacking in formality. And by the time in 2014 we woke up to it, it was already a huge problem. The NPA situation of today cannot be traced to any policy decisions of this present government. Of course, that's not an excuse. We were elected to rectify things, so it's assumed that it was bad. The growth rate had been declining from 2008 in GDP, and for the first year, 2014-15, and also 2015-16, the growth rate had increased, and then this decline has taken place since then. We have had 3 years of declines or projected declines, and right now I would say, after applying my mind to my knowledge of the GDP, the growth rate should be today about 6%. World Bank and other agencies are predicting that we will grow at 7.3, 7.5, etc. But these predictions mean nothing because nobody remembers what they predicted when the time comes. I would say that even if we achieved in this coming financial year, 2018-19, a 7.5% growth rate as the World Bank's prediction yesterday is correct, that's not sufficient. And what we need now is, excuse me, what we need now is a 10+% growth rate. And it is possible. I remember when I first began applying my mind after getting my PhD in economics and after teaching some years, I began applying my mind to the Indian economic situation. And I was horrified to find, and what turned out to be the true for the period 1950 to 1990, that the growth rate was only 3.5% per year. And most of the left-wing economists who dominated government policy in those days, because of the Soviet influence, they said that this is a Hindu rate of growth. Now, I don't know if communists are drawing up the 5-year plans, how can the growth rate become Hindu? In other words, they wanted to say that it is natural for a Hindu society to go slowly. But that's not correct. It was proved subsequent to 1990 when Narasimha Rao brought those reforms. I must tell you an interesting history that Narasimha Rao came after the Chandrasekhar government, which didn't last very long. I was a minister in that government. I also held a cabinet rank position in Narasimha Rao's government as chairman of International Trade and Labour Standards. Narasimha Rao actually was very keen to get me into the ministry itself formally, but he made a condition that I should join Congress party. And I told him that I can't do. So he asked me why. I said, because Congress party is a family property and you are just a tenant. I was proved right later on. But Narasimha Rao produced a miracle. And when Chandrasekhar was the Prime Minister, I had been asked by the Prime Minister to suggest a name for an economic advisor. And I immediately thought of Manmohan Singh, because I had known him for many years as a professor. And found out that he was in Geneva. He had gone back on some commission for developed countries or something like that. So I brought him back. We invited him back. He came back, but he made one condition, that Montek Singh Ahluwalia will also be brought into the government. So as my Commerce Secretary, Montek Singh joined in. So the three of us sat together and produced the reforms necessary, but could not implement it. Although the blueprints were produced by us, the courage to implement, which is required of politicians, was that of Narasimha Rao. And I think we should remember him. And I have recommended very strongly to the Prime Minister that the next Republic Day, Narasimha Rao should get the Bharat Ratna, which he deserves. But in short period of 5 years, we went from this 3.5 average to 8%, a little over 8%. Every year increasing growth rates. By dismantling the Soviet system. It was not very difficult to do, because although we used to hear propaganda that there is no inflation in Soviet Union, there is no poverty in Soviet Union, there is no unemployment in Soviet Union. But in 1990 we found out there is no Soviet Union also. Because it is broken up into 16 countries. And everybody found out what a mess. People compared West Germany and East Germany, and they were shocked at the difference in the economic development of these two states, which have now become one country. So, therefore, there was no pressure that the Soviet Union used to previously exercise. So, Narasimha Rao went full speed ahead. I'm sorry to say that we have never since then had systematic reforms the way he brought it in those 5 years. He directed it. We gave him the ideas, but he directed it and it was executed. So, today we need reforms. We need change. The economic policy we have to pursue should be scientifically structured. What is the meaning of scientifically structured? What is economic policy? It consists of 4 parts. And you should see these 4 parts separately. First part is, what are the objectives of your policy? 2, since the objectives are multiple, what are the priorities of your policy, of your objectives? Which comes first, which comes second, and so on. And third is, what is the strategy that you want to follow? And finally, how are you going to mobilize resources required for your economic policy objectives? This is the way documents should be addressed. We get fat documents from the Planning Commission and now this Niti Aayog, but there is no clarity as to what the objectives are. There is no clarity about what these strategies are. So, if you are to apply your mind as an economist and say, what should be the economic policy? You must deal with these four things separately. I want to mention one thing more as a professional economist, that there is a fundamental difference between economics as a science and the finance world that you know. Much of finance world is bilateral. I buy, you sell, we have a price negotiated, price is high, my demand is low. It's all bilateral. But when it comes to the economy, it's a system. It's a general equilibrium. And what you know in real life from common sense doesn't apply for the economy. The American president in 1925 found it out the hard way. He called all the economists at that time in America and said, unemployment is too high and I have an election coming. So how do I bring down the unemployment? And the economists were unanimous. And they said, to bring down unemployment, you have to persuade the labor unions to cut wages. And if you cut by 10%, you will wipe out the unemployment backlog. He was persuaded, if labor becomes cheap, of course people will employ more. But when he got the labor union to agree and implemented this 10% cut, he found unemployment had actually increased. The exact opposite what the recommendations were. Why? Because once you cut wages, you are also cutting purchasing power. And once you cut purchasing power, then the demand goes down. And demand goes down means units which were working on the margin, they'll all collapse and wind up. And there'll be more unemployment. So the general equilibrium of economics is different from this bilateral transactional economy that we all usually work on. So in India also these are important factors. We had a finance man from America called Raghuram Rajan, whom I'm happy to say I sent him home where he belongs. He was going on raising interest rates. And he was saying this is the way to control inflation. But he didn't realize that the more you raise interest rates, you make the cost of capital expensive or high, you raise the cost of capital. And so the small and medium industries which do much of the employing in our country, 2/3 of the employment comes from these industries. They began to fold up. And there was unemployment in the country. And he argued that no, the only way we can bring down inflation is by raising interest rates. Well, it's like a doctor saying the only way to bring down the temperature of a patient is to kill him. Definitely the temperature will come down, no doubt about that. But that's the end of the patient. So, therefore, this mentality of seeing everything in this bilateral way is the most dangerous part of our economic policy. And unless you are a professional economist who has been trained to be an economist, who has got a PhD in economics, I don't think that anybody and everybody can do economic policy. So today I'm saying, what are these four things that we have to do? Today, if you see the economic trends of the last 4 years, what do we find? We find the growth rate has declined. We only hear that in future it is going to go up. Every year, the World Bank will make a statement, but what happens, nobody remembers afterwards when the data actually come out. And but the fact is the growth rates have declined. 2, the gross fixed capital formation, which is roughly equal to the investment, that has also declined. It has declined sectorally also. Agriculture is the worst hit in this. Unemployment has gone up. These are also statistics. So there has been a general decline in the economy. But according to me, these are all reversible by a small change in policy. And that's what I want to talk to you about, what needs to be done. If you say that 7.5% growth rate is not enough for clearing the backlog of unemployment, for bringing about a reduction in poverty, then what is that minimum growth rate? According to me, it is 10%. Even more than 10% is even better. But if it is 10%, how are you going to achieve it? Well, technical economics tells us that the growth rate is the ratio of the rate of savings divided by the capital output ratio. Capital output ratio measures the efficiency in the use of capital. Our country today, it is 4.3, 4.4, which means about 4, if you invest 4.4 rupees in capital, then you will get in perpetuity 1 rupee per year in perpetuity. And that's very high compared to other countries. At one stage, Japan had 2.8. 3 is normal. If India were to get 3.5, say 3.5, and a rate of investment as 35% of GDP, that 35% of GDP divided by 3.5 will give you 10%. So that rule of thumb is the one that indicates to you how much you have to save. Our household savings is the largest in the world. No other country saves from the household as much as any other country. Our country, you will find that household savings is almost 29% of the GDP. Then you add corporate savings and so on. We were running at 36, 37% till all these recent events came. And now the rate of savings has also gone down. Foreign investment has never been more than 1 or 2%. And I don't think we should think of foreign investment as a panacea. And we have to be very careful that there's a level playing field. Earlier on, when I was Commerce Minister in the 90s, the Walmart had come to see me. Why I was opposing Walmart coming to India, knowing that I was well known as what they call as a free market proponent. I've never been for free market. I am for a market economy where the rules and regulations are umpired by the government and the government's participation in the economy is minimal. Market economy is different from laissez-faire. It's free for all. That can't suit our country. But I told them that, you see, you come here on a non-level playing field. It's all loaded in your favor. They said, how is that so? I said, at what rate do you get loans from banks? 2%. Our traders in our country, who are in millions and millions, they get loans from banks at not less than 12%, maybe 18%, and the informal market 25%. And they work with the cheap labor that we have. You come with 2% capital, at 2% interest your capital, and then you dip into our labor pool, and you expect this to be a fair competition. Our traders will all be wiped out. There will be no level playing field in this. It's all loaded in your favor. So they asked me how to correct it. I said, one way of correcting it is allow our companies to go to the United States with labor from our country and participate in building roads, houses, and so on. I'm sure that they will produce the lowest price for the tender and they will get it. Let our people go. Your people come here. You will come with the cheap capital and dip into our cheap labor. We will take our cheap labor to America and dip into your cheap capital. That's a fair exchange. They said that's an immigration problem. So whenever their interests are hurt, they come up with these explanations. I am not at all against blocking any foreign direct investment if it is a two-way street. But it cannot be a one-way street that you can have freedom to bring your capital and we don't have freedom to take our labor. Even on a highly skilled thing of software today, how much difficulty we are having. So therefore, let us not make the focus on foreign direct investment. And it has never been in our history more than 2 to 3% addition to the rate of investment. So our focus should be how to raise this rate of savings, how to encourage people. And I must say, to the credit of the women of India, that they quietly save a lot. In fact, when we had demonetization, the maximum abuses I got was from the household women, who had quietly put money under their sari over the years for the rainy day, and suddenly found all of them had become demonetized. So the Indian women, the Indian people generally, they are not spendthrifts. They save, and the household saving is the highest in the world for any country. China, their household savings is only 15%, whereas practically compulsory the way they have to force people to save. Even then, it's only 15% of GDP. Ours is double of that, 29%. In America, it is minus 2% because everything is on credit in America. So it's all minus. So therefore, in other countries, households contribute very little to the rate of saving. But our country, the households contribute. So you've got to have that in mind, how to encourage the households to save more. Even the corporate sector, the kinds of taxes that there are, it discourages people, and recently it has got worse. So much so that newspapers are talking about tax terrorism. So we must now incentivize our people to save. So our priority should be, our objective should be 10% growth rate. And therefore, full employment is possible. If you have 10% growth rate, given the labor output ratio, labor investment ratio, I can easily show that at 10% over a period of 10 years, you will wipe out the backlog and you will be running a full employment economy. So unemployment, poverty is connected really with unemployment. So employment becomes key, and therefore we should strategize that way. Strategy has to be, how do we motivate our people? Today there is gloom in the country, and I would say that the first thing we should do to remove the gloom. I must back off a little and give you an anecdote with me and Narasimha Rao. I told Narasimha Rao the reforms he's doing are wonderful. But I told him, recognize one thing, that all your reforms immediately are depriving the old vested interest of their loot. You abolish licenses and quotas. Large number of people, most of them your party members, I said, are earning by using their influence with ministers and getting these licenses and quotas and then selling it to other industries or selling it in the black market and making a huge profit. So suddenly it all will stop. So the vested interest will lose immediately. But the general public will be benefited, but they will not see it immediately. You say filter down and so on. It will take time. In this interim, the vested interest will create a campaign that you are supporting the industrialists, you are a stooge of the industrialists, you are a stooge of all the big houses, and you will suffer in the election. And it's a fact that in our country, anyone who has been for reforms has suffered in the election. Narasimha Rao lost the election. The man who produced you the most commendable historic economic change and raised your growth rates from the 3.5% to this 8% minimum, that person lost the election so badly that his party strength halved. So did Chandrababu Naidu lose, so did S.M. Krishna lose, and to some extent the same way Vajpayee, who spoke about India shining, he also lost. Of course, Vajpayee also lost because what makes the workers of the BJP work is the emotional appeal to Hindutva, and that, of course, had been completely kept out. So they didn't work. So he was defeated because of that also. But the fact is that if you design your reforms, you should be able to design it in such a way that the losers, as they lose, those who lose, the gainers should also gain something right away. So your reform package should include few things like that. And it's at that time when he asked me, Narasimha Rao, what can I do which will immediately benefit people? So I said, abolish income tax, and everybody will be immediately happy because it's instantaneous. And he was shocked. He said, abolish income tax? I said, yes, you are already collecting taxes through indirect taxes. Why do you need direct taxes? He said, no, then people will attack me. I said, very few people will attack you. Most people will praise you. Only the people who will abuse you is income tax inspectors, but that don't worry. There are a lot of rural development projects to which they can be sent. So, these are the things that are needed. So, what is the strategy? First strategy is incentivize the people to save more by abolishing income tax. I can tell you, if I ever get my hands on the finance ministry, the very first announcement I'll make is the abolition of income tax. Mr. Jaitley is a lawyer, so he likes to catch people and fix them. So, keep them in dispute all the time. So he enjoys increasing taxes and making it more difficult. But I, as an economist, feel you have to incentivize the people, you have to motivate them. Similarly, let not any loan be more costly than 9% interest rate. And at the same time, fixed deposits should also get 9%. Fixed deposit for 5 years, 9%. So the interest rate should promote savings so that people will want to save. And that will be, if you, today I think it's 6% or something, it should be raised to 9%. So this is the second thing we need to do, strategy-wise.